This is a polling place bill to maintain the integrity of our elections and to provide voters with a polling place free from interference or intimidation. This legislation clarifies and augments the prohibition against electioneering and related activities at the poll. We ran this bill last year. Some of you may remember from other hearings. The penalties have been for violating electioneering have also been cleared up, so clear that our state chiefs of police and the state sheriffs, all associations, all approve of this and support this measure. Ladies and gentlemen, I would make the case here, and I think others have done it, that polling places are hallowed ground. That most people, or I would say everyone in our country wants to be able to go to a polling place, vote, and go home. From the fire service, we used to call the lady that lived down the street from our stations Mrs. Smith, and the firm belief is that all of our practices should relate to Mrs. Smith. And I think this bill gives Mrs. Smith a safe, convenient, comfortable way to drive to the station, drive to the polling place, make her mark where she believes it should be, get back in her car and drive home. So this legislation addresses a growing problem that we've had in our polls in our own state. The problem is voters are interfered with as they enter the polling places and even as they exit. So be it overzealous campaign workers or petition circulators, this bill actually cuts both ways. There's a story a story from the Coeur d'Alene Press that's included in a handout along with the letters of support from the police chiefs and the sheriffs. What this bill does, it extends the distance for campaigning to be 250 feet from the front door and the exit of the polling place. It also defines where the starting point is by saying it's the doors, not just the building footprint. It clarifies what's prohibited, essentially campaigning and electioneering, and we all know what campaigning is. It also gives law enforcement an easy way and an easy radius to deal with. It doesn't trample on our free speech options outside of 250 feet, nor does it trample on any private property issues, as private property is specifically carved out of this bill. What you do on private property is private. So what it doesn't do is important as well. It does not stop things outside of 250 feet. That's up to the people that want to go to the polls. And it doesn't stop coffee stands either. What it does do, it just gives Mrs. Smith a safe and comfortable place to go vote. So I'll end with this. Our county clerks also support this measure. And I'll just end with, let's keep our polling places hassle-free. There's a time to campaign. We all know what that is. And there's also a time to vote. And I think that the time to vote is at your polling place and to do it comfortably. I stand for questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. You've heard the motion. Is further debate on the motion? Gentleman from 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we did see this bill last year, and we voted against it last year, I believe. That's right. This is a free speech issue, folks. Electioneering has a name, electioneering, but it's about free speech. It's about the right of people who oppose or support issues and candidates to make their voice known. And that's what happens outside of a polling place. Now, currently, the statute says within 100 feet, you may not do electioneering. And there have been a couple of incidents, and there are two pointed out from, I believe, the Coeur d'Alene Press over the last couple of years. Both of those incidents were handled without issue. The police or sheriffs took care of those issues. Now, that happened at 100 feet. There's nothing to say that those issues wouldn't happen at 250 feet or at 500 feet or a half a mile or a mile or 2 miles away. The distance is not the problem. The problem is people don't agree on issues. And that's okay because that's free speech. I can't stress strongly enough how important it is for people to be able to voice their opinions about candidates and issues. And to do that while people are on the way to vote is okay as long as they don't interfere with their actual voting, which is not happening. They're not blocking doors to polling stations. That is not happening. People have access to their polling stations. If they don't want to take literature, or if they don't want to hear the person who's out there campaigning for or against issues, they just ignore it. It's as simple as that. I urge you to not vote for this. This is an impingement on our First Amendment rights.
For debate on the motion. Gentleman 25.
To debate, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
I've heard often on the floor of this body, people saying they want everyone to vote in person at the polling place. Well, that's what this bill does. It allows more people to vote in place at the polling place, because I have had people call me and say that because of the electioneering near the polling places, they don't feel comfortable going to the polling place, so they vote early or they use absentee ballot. This would help those people go to the polls and vote in person rather than using the other things, which I've heard often hear people saying everyone should vote at the polling place. Well, this one helps them to do so because they don't feel like, as one person called it, they have to run a gauntlet of people sprouting information to them. And then when they come back out, they get it back in the other direction as well, even though they've already voted. So what's going to change? So please vote, put a green light on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. For debate on the motion. Gentleman 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a question from the gentleman from 1.
Gentleman from 1 yields to a question.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
Will this interfere with exit polling data that's taken at the time of elections? Will they have to be 250 feet away as well?
Gentleman 2 from 1. Excuse me.
Mr. Speaker, gentleman from 2, it's 250 feet.
If so, for exit polling as well?
So, well, it's
The gentleman yield to another question.
absolutely.
Gentleman yields. You can ask your next question. Gentleman 2.
So it would include exit polling, even though that is not electioneering?
Gentleman from 1.
Doesn't actually say exit polling. What it does, it just says that we should stay electioneering should be kept 250 feet from exits and entrances at polling places.
Mr.
Jump to.
Speaker, another question to the gentleman.
Would the gentleman yield to an additional question?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
On, well, I guess it's on the first page, and starting at line 19, when it talks about primary entrance and exits by voters. In some instances in the county I live, there's parking lots. They're the only place you can get in. Would this include the entrance and exit to the parking lot as well?
Gentleman from 1.
Mr. Speaker and gentleman from 2, it paints a radius at 250 feet on the polling place property. Private property is not included in this.
Gentleman
Follow-up?
2.
Follow-up.
Would the gentleman from 1 yield to another question?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
So now, instead of talking about the entrance to the polling place, we're talking about the perimeter of the property. Is that correct?
Gentleman from 1.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, actually, no, we just talk about 250 feet from the doors. It doesn't say the perimeter of the property.
Gentleman from 2. Further discussion on the motion. Gentleman 13.
Mr. Speaker, debate in favor of the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the body. I appreciate the work that the good gentleman from District 1 has done on this legislation. There were some concerns last year that were raised. One was the issue of if your home was within the parameters of this, how we would deal with that. The good gentleman has taken care of that issue. I'll guarantee if you go talk to your constituents and ask them, do you like to be harassed at the polls? Put that ballot question out there. They don't want to be harassed at the polls. You should have been, as an elected official, you should have made your case prior to Election Day that you are the candidate that they should go and select, and you shouldn't be harassing people. I can remember a couple of years ago, there was a initiative that they were trying to get on the ballot. I showed up to my polling place and signature gatherers were there. They were within 100 feet. They were violating state law. I've got it on video. I showed it to the former Secretary of State, trying to get him to do something to prosecute these people. It's annoying to be harassed at the polling places. This is a technique that has been used for decades by various parties or various interest groups, and it's wrong. The people need to be able to go into the polling place. They need to be unharassed. They need to be able to go in there and make their decision and come out unharassed. So I would ask that you guys give this your green light. It's good legislation. It's currently 100 feet, and he's moving it to 250 feet. I think he's done a good job with it, so I'd ask that the body support this bill.
Thank you, Jones. Further debate on the motion? Good. Gentleman from 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman rise for a question?
Gentleman from 1 yield to question.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. How about someone that's wearing paraphernalia, such as a Trump shirt, and they're just going to vote, and or a button with some party? How is that affected?
Gentleman from 1.
Mr. Speaker, gentleman from 7, I think those in charge of the poll may say something about that, about the campaigning part of it. This bill specifically talks about the polling place and electioneering outside that 250 feet. So that's the primary. This is more of a geography thing than anything else. So I think that's addressed in other parts of code, and I think it's addressed by the people that are in charge of the polls.
Gentleman 7.
Thank you. To debate against the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to politics, passions just fly. And I think that this could very easily, someone dressed in the wrong attire could say, I'm sorry, but you need to be turned away, or an argument could happen. So for that reason, I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Is there further debate on the motion? Lady from 2.
Would the gentleman yield a question?
Gentleman yields to a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. I'm curious about private locations versus public locations. Can you clarify that for me?
The gentleman from 1.
Mr. Speaker, lady from 2, it's
Gentleman
250
from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order. This bill has been in front of my committee 2 years in a row. This question was asked and was addressed in committee this year. So I think that we need to be very careful, those of us that sit on that committee that know the answer to the question should not be asking questions that we already know the answer to. But the gentleman's free to answer it if he wants to.
Thank you, Gentleman 13. Let's be cautious.
Mr.
We know the answer. Good lady
Speaker,
from
if
2.
I may,
Yeah.
I do not know the answer to this question because I just got called on the floor by someone that has a polling location at a private location. And I'm trying to understand the discrepancies between a private versus public. And I'm being told that on private property, you cannot restrict this. So I'm trying to make sure I have that clarified. And I do not know the answer to the question. Good gentleman from 30, whatever.
13.
13.
Good gentleman from 1.
Sir and ma'am, as far as I know, all of our polling places are on public ground. They're either in public places or whatever. This bill simply pushes electioneering outside of the 250 feet. That's all. I don't know about any conflicts that we have with private property rights on that. We specifically carved out the idea that a polling place or private ground could be used for private purposes in the bill. It doesn't talk about that. It's all on public ground.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To testify against the bill.
He has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is some of my concern about the discrepancy. A lot of times we think of things on what we know and where we poll, but where we go to our voting. But there are many different locations across the state that are on private property. And so churches, there's a lot of churches that are polling locations. I'm not sure what this is going to look like there. My other concern is with this legislation is we have been doing 100 feet for a long time, and that has been very effective. Citizens know their limits. Up north, it's very rural. We don't disseminate information as you do in the urban areas. And so up north, on polling day, we have 10 set up past the 100-foot mark, and people have candidate information for citizens that decide if they want to stop in or not. And we have a strong sheriff, so we don't have people harassing citizens or voters, but this has become a very effective tool in rural areas to get information to people that don't really come to town very much. I know that seems odd. It's odd when I live down here, but some people don't go to town but once a month. So this is a very effective tool up north, and as you can see, people up north are very engaged, and so since it has been so successful, I'm seeing pushback. My other concern with this bill is the language in it. To me, it's very similar to fear-mongering language that we have seen at the national level, Senate Bill 1318 in Congress, and some of the Minnesota, let's just say the Democrat bills from Minnesota are targeting the same thing.
No,
so I want, when people come to the polls, I want them to be educated. I want them to know all the details that they can know. And if someone chooses to stop at a booth to get information before they go into the vote, I think they should have that right. 100-foot is to me
This is a
something we've used
Republican-sponsored
forever.
bill.
250 feet in some of our rural areas is in a road. It's on a main highway, or it's on a rural road, and that's where my concern is, in these rural areas. And so for that, I'm going to be against this bill.
For debate on the motion, Gentleman 25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking in favor of the motion,
Gentleman has the floor.
a couple of comments I'm going to make is that, and I didn't plan to speak, but some of the questions and answers. The 100-foot rule had the same problem if someone walked in with a Biden or a Trump shirt. And I've experienced in a situation like that where someone just said, could you put your coat on and cover it up? I mean, that doesn't change with 100 feet or 250 feet. If you walk in that last 100 feet, you're still in violation. So that shouldn't be an issue. The question about private property, I think, is pretty clearly covered in the bill. They're talking about a polling place. If it happens to be somebody's personal residence and it's a polling place, that becomes a polling place. And so the 250 feet starts from
17
there. And the other
LDS
question
churches
about
in
restrictions set forth in
Franklin
private
County
property,
that are
it's very
polling
clearly,
places.
it
That's
says
private property.
that private property adjacent to, there's no effect in this law. So I think it's well written, and I don't have a big, strong feeling about should be 250 or 100 feet, but I do know that we're seeing an encroachment. And I do think that Election Day is an important day, and I agree with the gentleman from 13. I believe when he kind of commented, if you're not done with your election by Election Day, you know, to get out there and push the limits on this is inappropriate. So.
For debate on the motion, Gentleman 26.
For debate, sir, please.
Gentleman has the floor to debate.
I didn't really plan on testifying either, but I absolutely agree with the gentleman from 25. The beauty of this bill, it leaves everything that we've been living with 100 feet in place. It simply pushes it out to 250 feet. And I can't imagine anyone having a problem that voters can't come within 250 feet of a polling place and be harassed for their vote.
Down in Franklin County, a major highway down there,
and this is simply respectful
within
of the people that come out
200
to the
feet
polls. I would
is
urge a green light.
the polling place.
For debate on the motion,
It's an LDS church.
good lady 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate.
Lady has the floor to debate.
So I keep on hearing the word harass, and I don't see the word harass in this bill. I see electioneering. And if we're equating electioneering as harassment, then we need to address that problem. I agree with the lady from 2 that this bill affects what's going on in North Idaho because of the rural polling places. So I too will be voting against this bill.
Further debate on the motion. Lane 33.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. More comments, so I guess it just debate.
He has the floor to debate.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Friends, just a couple of thoughts that I'm trying to read through this and work out. A good gentleman from 1, and actually I'm thinking the good gentleman from 25 last year. The good gentleman from 25 last year initially brought an election bill that I was trying to support. And one of the biggest reasons I was trying to support is because we weren't necessarily using our elementary schools, our high schools, junior highs like I think we should for polling. So in Idaho Falls, we have had a struggle, and I think in many of your places, to find places to vote. So in Idaho Falls, we do use private facilities, so I was kind of curious about that question. The place where I work, big place, my boss is very gracious, and they shut the whole gym down for the day, and that's a polling place. Sometimes they've had 2 polling places in there, and there are other places beside the churches that are used. So since we've gotten into that realm, and I guess I do have questions on what that means for private places. I'm not yet decided, but you need to know that private places are used.
For debate on the motion, Lane 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
He has the floor to debate the bill.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with the good lady from 33, what she just said, and others, that there are some private places, particularly churches. But as I read the bill, I think it says any polling place. And if it isn't a church, then it should be 250 feet from the door. Electioneering is electioneering. And I think what this body and the good gentleman from 1 is trying to say is that we do not want to push people. We do not want to, I mean, not physically, but to say, here's this list of candidates. These are the ones you should vote for, little Mrs. Smith. And we shouldn't do that. There's newspapers, there's emails, there's so many different things that these people have seen when they are coming to the polls. And I agree 100%, because in my district, we poll at, many of our precincts poll at a very large facility, is a fairgrounds. And there has been incidents on both sides of the coin. The folks with the initiative were close. They were, I guess, 100 feet away, but there was a lot of raucous and ruckus and problems going on, and there's passing out of papers, and people are dodging the people. And I just think 250 feet, Mrs. Smith can come up and park away from the riffraff if that's what she thinks it is, and she doesn't have to engage in that. I think that we owe that to our citizens and to our voters. So I would encourage your green light on this bill.
So do you take your yard sign down if it's within?
For debate on the motion.
It's got to be 250 feet away instead of 100 feet?
Hearing none, would the good gentleman from 1 care to close the debate?
Yes, sir, you bet. A couple things, just based on the comments. I don't believe that this bill takes anything away from our free speech rights.
Especially if all you have is
we all
TV, radio,
have
and
that
$2
option.
postcards.
It just pushes it back 250 feet. A number of people have mentioned that the polling places should be a hallowed place, and I think this bill helps with that. I do believe that 100 feet is a problem. Much the same would be if this room was condensed into about half its size and we all had to sit a lot closer together. There's just a lot more heat in the room, and I think that adds to the issue. So I think pushing people out, that campaigning stuff out to 250 feet, I think it just gives you a little more space. I'm not advocating to push things out for 500 feet or any other distance.
How about out of town?
Although I would say that probably would calm things down even more. But I'm not advocating for
I know,
that,
because
nor
the
has
postman's gonna
anyone else that's
deliver
worked on this
your
bill.
card.
So
to everybody around
it was
that
mentioned that
polling
the
place.
police didn't have an issue with an
Because
article
it's paid
that was
for
handed
by
out.
corporate
But
lobbies.
I believe the parking and the
You are a
accident problem
Republican,
that was
yes,
pointed out
that's
was at
correct.
5:30 in the morning. So I
95%
doubt that
of
that was a
all
polling place issue at that point.
donations
I think it
to
was
the
just a
Republican
traffic
Party
accident
come
in a
from
parking
corporate
lot.
lobbies. Go to the
So,
Idaho Secretary of State,
I stand
Sunshine
corrected. And
Report, and you'll see
I'm
it.
graciously, I'm very grateful to our people here in our room to help me. I'm an old guy, and here I am trying to work on the fly, public and private places. But the reality is, a polling place is a public place. If just for that moment, and I think the idea that we would take such good care of it and that we would give some space around it, I think is important. We have had many problems in the north part of our state. I'm aware in the county north of me, they've had problems with people standing in the driveway while people wanted to come in and vote.
Oh, come on, buddy.
Whether we call that a hassle or a hindrance or anything else, I think
You
most
tell-
of us
when
would
that
say
happens,
we like
you
to
tell
drive
the
in, vote, and
Polling
leave.
place judge, and they go out and they tell them
We've
that
also,
they don't move.
another thing that was mentioned is we have
and they
small
will.
spots sometimes for voting,
And
and
if they
I can
don't move,
appreciate
then the
that,
election
but a lot
judge
of our
calls
places that we
the
vote
elections clerk in the
are
county
in church
and
parking
reports it.
lots,
And they send
those are
somebody
pretty
out.
big. So are the Grange parking lots, and I know we vote in those as well. So
At least they do it in
all that
Bannock
said,
County,
I'd
that's
like
what
to
they
thank
do.
the rep from 25 for helping me out a little bit.
They do a good job in
And
Bannock
I'm
County.
really asking for a green light on this one. So I tthank you all for your time. Thank you.
That's a
Thank you,
bunch of
gentlemen.
maybe-
Debate's closed. Question is, shall Senate Bill
Why did they?
1244
Yeah.
pass the House? Clerk will lock the machine. Members will cast their votes.
It's all party line vote, isn't it?
Has every member voted?
I guess too many
19.
people have been successful
Does
getting
anybody
elected.
change
They
their
just
vote?
don't like it because
Clerk will lock the machine, record the
Yeah.
roll. 57 ayes, 12 nay, 1 absent, excused. Majority haven't voted in favor of Senate Bill 1244. Senate Bill 1244 is passed the House. Correction title. Hearing none, title's approved. Bill will be transmitted to Senate. Gentlemen,